Should be
Okay,
live.
good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you happen to be around the world. And welcome to a long delayed but finally available episode of the Groovy podcast. My name is Ken Kousen. I'm podcasting out of Marlborough, Connecticut, and I'm joined as always by our good friend.
Baruch Sadogursky broadcasting today live from Sunnyvale, California.
So you're finally home. I mean, you've been like everywhere. Where have you been
Yeah,
just in the past month? Just that.
yeah. So we did KubeCon last week. That was very nice. It's a good conference this year. You won't believe it. The expo hall had actually natural sunlight.
Wow, where was this?
San Diego Convention
Sorry, I got a little
huge hall with like huge windows. San Diego,
sorry.
San Diego.
Yeah, okay, good. There was a little bit of a glitch there in the internet access. So, where did you say it was?
San Diego.
Oh, San Diego. Oh, I love San Diego. So that's the Kubernetes one, right?
Yeah. It's Kubernetes and everything cloud native. Very good conference. Yeah. And
And
before we did a couple of conferences in St. Petersburg. It was Joker and the Foops, and yeah. It's been busy and keep getting busy. I only have 5 more till the end of the year.
five more what?
Until the end of the year.
I mean, didn't realize it's almost Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So where
So
are you
I'm
off to?
almost done. It's almost and Thanksgiving, and I'm almost done. That makes perfect sense.
Wow, that sounds like a lot to me. I mean, I've scaled back a lot of my traveling. I'm doing a lot more online these days. The no fluff, just stuff season is over for me. There's a couple of conferences down in Florida in December, the Progressive Web Summit and the Tech Leaders Summit and the ArcConf, as they call it, the architecture one. I'm not
And
scheduled
there
for
was
that.
that's the series that used to have Groovy in it,
Yeah,
and
the
and
progressive
we
web one, which they used to call Rich Web Summit, right? That used to have Grails and things like that, but they decided apparently not to.
no,
Uh,
there was like what's it called, 3G G3 whatever it was.
well, that was a little different. That was the combination with Spring One and also the. Oh, I know what you mean. The G3 stuff. Yeah, that's all evolved into other things now. I'm
Yeah.
going to Kotlin Conf in December, but that's unrelated. I don't know what the over under was for our podcast today to mentioning Kotlin, but there it is. So whoever had what less than 5 minutes in, I guess wins
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. Obviously,
Of course, as
obviously.
long as we're mentioning conferences, why don't we start right off with that? Let's see,
Uh,
where's my web page for it? So
yeah, let's talk about the important conferences, the Groovy conferences, not your Kotlin stuff.
yes, of course, right. So we have Greach, of course. So
Yep.
Greach, Greach, just looking at the page here, is the conference in Madrid, right?
Hmm.
And I have the dates here. I'm trying to see where I put it. Greach, 26th, 20 of March, 2020. And the call for papers is still open. So I put the link for the call for papers in the show notes. That's available until January 10th. So they're actually giving us a fair amount of time on that. So Sergio, what do you think? Do you think he owes us big time for bringing this up now, or what do you think?
Yep.
All this, he's been giving us a hard time for all this time about not having enough Groovy podcasts. And yet, you know, there's supposed to be the Groovy Calamari podcast, right? Right?
I don't know what is it anymore. I think it does not exist.
I mean, Groovy Calamari came out recently, so that was good. The biggest problem I have with the Groovy Calamari, the actual email, is I still misspell calamari every time. I mean, I still have to fix that every time I put it in there as a link. But otherwise, that's useful. So, calamari, Calamari. I always have to remember that. I think the current issue is 166, I think. Oh no, they're up to 169. I put in an old one in the links
Ah,
there.
that's okay.
Well,
That's
there was
okay.
a
Yeah,
couple of
we'll
things
fix it.
inside it I liked. He did mention the Micronaut and AWS webinar, which I really wanted to go to, and I had a conflict with that, so I wasn't able to go to that. But I know a lot of people are using AWS, and of course, if you can do Micronaut on that, which you can, of course, that's a good,
That's awesome. Yeah,
very useful.
yeah.
And it also mentioned that the as we're coming up on releases, Gradle 6.0 is out, and in fact, Gradle has version since that to 6.0.1. Not that that's much of a difference, but I put
Yeah, it's a bug fix.
yeah, just bug fix release, right? So mostly, from what I understand with Gradle 6, is that they have done some work on the dependency management parts and updated some documentation, and they fixed the problem they were having with JDK 13. I don't remember what the problem was. I just remember I tried to run it under JDK 13, and I ran into all sorts of weird issues. But if you backed off to 11, the current, I mean, long-term support release of Java, then it worked just fine. But at any rate,
Hmm.
Gradle 6.0.1 was fixed. Unfortunately, I didn't get to attend this either, but yesterday, I think it was yesterday. No, yesterday's Sunday. So it must have been late last week. They had a webinar on new features in Gradle 6. That was by Jen Strader and somebody else from the Groovy team or the Gradle team. I don't remember who exactly. So when the recording for that is available, then we'll bring that up in a Groovy podcast, assuming we have future Groovy podcasts, right?
Oh, of course we will. Look at all our undertakers. They keep
Right.
saying Groovy podcast is going to die. They don't release and what's
Ah,
not.
well, I have to give a shout out to
Where are they? And we are still here.
we have to
Yeah.
give a shout out to okay, how do you pronounce his name? How do you suppose Simon Stepniak?
Look like Simon Stepniak. Yes.
Yeah, I would guess it's Simon, but it might have a Z. I don't know if the Z is silent, or I suppose he would say Z. I assume he's European.
But it's a thing. Butchering names. It's one of the things of this podcast. So we are not apologizing.
No, well, no. I look with my last name. I have no right to get anybody else's name wrong. You know what I mean?
Well,
I,
you're talking about your last name.
that's
That was funny.
exactly. That means I have to spend special attention getting other people's name right. Because I mean, what right do I have to mess them up? But Simon's been great, and of course he's been prodding us to get a podcast going. And when I
Yeah.
mentioned in my newsletter that I promised there was going to be one this week, he went and highlighted that and put it on Twitter and everything. By the way, we have got to have him on a podcast. So as long as we brought him up, did you notice he's been cranking out a few interesting posts on his own?
Yes. Yes. A lot of blog posts. Good stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Yes.
find the actual link that I had open already. His
So the quick sort in Groovy, right? Can
right,
can it be as fast as implemented in Java?
yeah, he did
That's one of
three.
them.
He did three that I added in there. It's interesting. His web page, his homepage for the blog anyway, is e.printstacktrace.blog of all things. I mean, that is like I didn't even know you could
Yep.
have a .blog extension.
Yeah. I think it's one of the
He
new.
has
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it worked. Any rate, he puts these under a category called Groovy Cookbook, and the ones that I included because I was just going back a little ways. One was on Groovy trampoline closure to talk about recursive closures and everything using the trampoline method on Groovy's closure. So that gets into functional programming and performance issues and things like that. He seems to be really into talking about performance issues, and I really like that he uses like JMH to do
Yeah,
this.
that was June though. That
Yeah,
was before we had our previous episode. So I'm just saying.
right. Yeah, we get credit for having episodes since then. Yes, he did one. He updated his one on Grawl. So back at the beginning of October, he did. He did a talk, as I recall, at um, the conference in Copenhagen. Um, You know what I'm referring to.
Great conf.
Yeah, great conf on Graal, running Groovy on Graal VM, Graal virtual, and it's always a challenge to run on Graal VM if you do anything dynamic. And of course, Groovy has some dynamic capabilities. So I think he updated his blog post on Groovy and Graal to the latest Graal version, the latest Groovy stuff. And then, of course, is the one you were about to mention. What was that one again? The quick sort.
Yeah, the quick sort is the latest. It's like what, a couple of days ago, yesterday actually.
Right. And he, again, in that one was talking about trying to maximize performance out of it and using compile static. And it's got his little JMH benchmark. And as I recall, the issue, kind of strange. I didn't expect the issue that he got. The issue had to do with the split method inside of the collection. So that if he was trying to do a recursive call and they were trying to do a split, if you don't use split, it turned out to be the source of any delays, even though the delays were not big, they were there. So
Mm-hmm.
for what it's worth.
Yep, yep, yep. And talking about blogs which are seldomly, which are updated even more seldomly than this there is a blog that wasn't updated in 10 years, and
Oh, really?
that's Scott Hickley. Yeah, Scott Hickley's blog, Dev Groovy.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he has um, a new blog post since October 2009. So it's
right.
actually more than 10 years. And yeah, and that's a very very nice little blog post about Groovy Enterprise and how it can and how big enterprises can, which are usually very rigid in how they approach innovation and what's not, can benefit from Groovy. So I don't think there are a lot of like new or mind-boggling things, especially for people who keep the tabs up with what's new in Groovy. But it's still very very nice summary, and the fact that in a decade actually is quite impressive. I think we should strive to this cadence next time.
Oh, once every 10 years, I think we can
That
beat that. Yeah.
All right, we'll try. We'll do our best. Yes.
But he does. I mean, he works at a large organization. I don't know if he wants us to mention it or not, but I mean, so they are conservative, as you say, and yet
Yeah.
he still uses the Groovy DSL inside of Jenkins, and he uses Spock and Jeb. Uh, Actually, Jeb did. I think I forgot to add a release. Well, we might have added it last time. Jeb is up to 3.2 now. By the way, don't know if you've used that much.
Yeah, I think we have it in the show notes, right? We have Jebs here somewhere.
I think we did last time. I don't. By the
Ah,
way,
okay, okay.
I made a typical off by one error again on the episode numbers. We're
Okay.
definitely season 4, episode 3. That part's right, and we're episode 77 this time. But
Yeah.
if you notice, we have 2 episode 74s and then a 76. So the second
Uh,
74 is supposed to be a 75.
we release so fast. It's just hard to keep tabs. I suggest we're doing a liquid podcast. We give up on the version numbers and just release a new groovy podcast every once in a while, and you can assemble it to one endless episode of groovy podcast. That's my vision.
Uh, well, we'll think about it. But yeah, I used to think when I was doing a lot of coding in industry, it was always I used to think off by one error was my middle name anyway, and yeah. So sorry about that. And I don't think we go back and update it. I think we view it as um, sort of
Yeah,
a
it's an Easter egg.
it's
It's
a
an Easter
what
egg
did I
for
used
sure.
to I tried to explain to my son that when my wife would do odd things sometimes that I tried to explain the concept of an endearing characteristic, that something that you might otherwise consider a flaw is actually kind of appealing, when you view it in that light. uh,
Exactly.
he didn't quite get that. It took a while, for him to figure that out. But that's an endearing characteristic, right? That we make those sorts of mistakes, and Oh, I'd give up. Any rate, I mean, if we had actual production values, maybe we would fix these things and do stuff like that. Oh,
No,
speaking of
no.
which, by the
It
way,
will, as you said, it will lose a lot of the personality of the Groovy podcast.
yes, it's part of its
Right. And
charm, right? Is that the idea that
exactly.
we have
So
such charm?
there are, yeah. So that we have couple of traits, right? Low key production and mess with the episode numbers
Yeah, but
and high cadence of releases, very frequent podcasts. It's a part of our DNA. You can't just start doing rare
yeah, well, now
podcasts like Groovy Calamari or anything. We have to be what we are, releasing very, very frequently.
okay, but now we're just rationalizing, so we need to move on. Okay. By the way, regarding one other thing I want to say about Greach, forgot to mention, they do have diversity tickets available. So if
Yeah,
somebody
this is
needs some
important.
assistance, there is definitely a ticket available for anyone who is, well, however they define the diversity ticket requirements. I would say if you're not sure at all, go ahead and apply. I mean, what the heck? You'll find out.
That's
Uh,
what we do for speaker slots. We are not sure, and we just go ahead and apply.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, actually. Right. You just throw in a request and hope that things work out. Okay, what else should we discuss here? Versions, perhaps? Groovy is on RC 300 release candidate 1. From what I understand, I would bet that RC2 comes out. I mean, since we're doing the podcast today, then what do you think? This afternoon, tomorrow?
Yeah. Definitely before Thanksgiving. You remember how they always told us that Groovy 3 is expected by the end of the year and never specifying the year?
That's smart. Yeah, that's very smart.
Now looks like we know the year. Groovy 3.0 will be out by the end of 2019.
Uh, 2020, maybe. I don't know. I mean,
No, it's so close. I mean, the release candidates are coming in. They should be releasing. I believe in before Christmas. That's I mean looks looks feasible this time.
well, we're looking forward to that. And we're still, I mean, we do want to arrange to talk to Paul King again when that
Yep.
happens. But we've been kind of waiting until Groovy 3.0 came out on that. I think what's interesting, by the way, what's highly amusing, did you notice the A Press book? Did you see that?
Which one? The Learning Groovy 3?
Yeah,
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
a Learning Groovy 3 book out already.
Well,
Um,
I mean, if you want to be the thing is, if you want to uh, the release will come any day now, and people will start looking for books. And if your
yeah,
book is out there already, this is how you get the competitive edge.
I think that's okay. It's an A Press book. It's from I don't know I don't know that person. Do you know him? Uh,
No, I don't think I ever heard
yeah, Adam.
about Adam Davis. I don't
Right.
know who he is really.
I actually do. I have to admit, I actually have a copy of this book that I got through other mechanisms. So I unfortunately I haven't read through it yet. You know, I've got to go through it. But they do have the table of contents. Basically, makes it look like it's pretty much just the straightforward stuff. Although they do get into traits, and they have a section on Jeepers, you know, and the parallel stuff, and Spock and Rat Pack and all of those different things. So you know, I'm glad to see that there's still a market. You know, that A Press still believes that there's that worth putting Groovy books, and we'll see. I have to find out how that sells. You know, how they're doing on that one.
Yeah. So we'll see. Adam, he's doing a lot of stuff around Groovy. So if you look at his Lean Pub, you can see there is a course in Groovy 3 as well, and right Groovy 3 course, and obviously he has a blog post and about it, and I think the last blog was June 28th, and we definitely did a couple of episodes after that. And he did a summary of Great Con for You, actually. So,
Uh,
yeah, I bet we run into these guys, and we will we didn't get to to know him and to connect, but we will definitely going to fix that.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's good. And we'll take a look. And we do need to. I mean, I'm fully aware of how overwhelming it is to actually put out one of these books and everything. So if he hasn't been that active lately, well, I can hardly blame him. I get that.
Yeah. Well, how many books you write
Yeah. Well,
now?
number 4 is coming out now. So the by
And you
Scotland.
still manage to do very frequent groovy podcasts.
Sergio's never going to let us get away with this, I mean,
Uh,
and he's right. That's the problem. He gives us a hard time, and it's justified. That's the difficulty. I mean, that doesn't mean we shouldn't.
who is Sergio? Is the guy that used to do the Groovy Calamari podcast but doesn't do it anymore?
Yeah, he's the guy running Greech. That's it. That's what it is. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. Here we do podcasts more frequently. Just saying.
Okay. All right. Let's get back to something at least somewhat recognizable. Okay, Micronaut is up to the latest version of Micronaut I had listed in SDK Man, among other things. Let's do a quick check again. Micronaut is 1. Oh, wait a minute. I think there's a typo in the list here. 1.1.4. No. Micronaut is up to 1.3 milestone 1.
Yeah, that's
The
Wonder
release version
4
is
is June. Sorry, July, and we did podcast since then. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Let me fix the. Well, be sure to. We'll have to fix the link on that. So the current version is 1.2.6, and the I know they have a milestone version on their 1.3.0 on that. So we'll update the show notes to put
Yep.
that in there. Micronaut actually has been breaking. There's always the question of whether something will break into the wider ecosystem. And the people at OCI, Jeff Brown and Graham Roche and the others have been pushing Micronaut very hard lately. And one of the things that I'm always aware of, because Neil Ford's on the No Fluff Just Stuff, conference tour, is the ThoughtWorks Tech Radar.
Oh yeah. This is huge. This is really big, and I'm really excited to see Micronaut moving from assess to trial. Those are great news, and I have to say that was very fast. Usually, it takes ThoughtWorks guys a much longer time to move anything from assess to trial, and seeing Micronaut just rocketing through it. Those are great news and great recognition.
Yeah, so for those who are not aware,
Very happy to see that.
ThoughtWorks is a consulting firm that has as its chief scientist the very famous enterprise architect developer. Martin Fowler, of course.
Yeah,
wrote
of course.
patterns of enterprise application architecture, many other books, and they do consulting work all over the world. And they have this tech radar where they actually spend a lot of time. They get their consultants together over weeks, and they evaluate a whole series of technologies, and they put it on. If I look at the picture, they put it on either the outermost ring is hold, and then something moves from hold to assess, where they decide whether it's actually worth looking into, and then they move to trial, and finally from trial it moves into adopt. And as you mentioned, Micronaut has now moved from the assess ring into the trial ring. And the little blurb here, just for those who are curious, it says VM framework services using Java, Kotlin, or Groovy. Missed the Oxford comma. Ugh, oh well. It distinguishes. I don't know. I'm sensitive to that. It distinguishes itself through a small memory footprint and short startup time, as we know. It achieves those improvements by avoiding runtime reflection for dependency injection and proxy generation, a common shortcoming of traditional frameworks, and instead uses a DI/AOP container, which performs dependency injection and compile time. This makes it attractive, not just for standard server-side microservices, but also in the context of, for example, the Internet of Things, Android applications, serverless functions, etc. So they say we're seeing it more and more projects in production. That's a significant statement, prompting us to move it to trial. Now, I wish, I guess we should ask Jeff or Graham for, if they can give us some actual examples of that happening. But that's really good news. Yeah, as you say, that's significant because they're very reluctant to move things into the trial version unless they see it in running a lot closer.
Absolutely. So I will give you an example. A great test for and no sarcasm here. Really, one of the super useful things in test and latest years, the test containers
Right.
that you use Docker for testing, and it's an extraordinary piece of software. It's been in trial for a very long time, and we don't see it moving to access. And it's just for you to give you an example of how reluctant ThoughtWorks is to moving something to assess, and the
I,
reason
I,
for that
I
is
think you're saying it backwards. It's in assess. They haven't moved it to trial yet.
yeah, sorry, of
Yeah, yeah.
course, yes,
Go ahead.
yes, the other way around. And the reason for it is because TechRadar is actually a snapshot of what ThoughtWork consultants do at their customers.
Ah,
It's not like just an analytics thought experiment. What would I use? It's actually reflects what they are suggesting to customers that pay them money, and this is why they are so reluctant and they are so responsible in making those moves around, because it actually reflects in the end of the day their revenue as consultants, and this is why it's such a big deal.
it's also interesting that one of the things I'd never heard of, but Graham mentioned when I talked to him on the last podcast at the conference formerly known as Java One, um, the another microservice type framework is called Quarkus, that
Hmm.
Quarkus. I had never heard of that, and that came out very recently from Red Hat as another microservices framework, and it's also runs on Graal and everything. And that one's in assess. That one's in their middle of the road assess part. It's nice to see that Micronaut has moved in a whole nother layer from that one.
Absolutely. And I have to say that Quarkus got much more publicity, if you wish,
I know.
because of Red Hat, and
Right.
also for some reason Oracle itself kind of embraced Quarkus as their best usage of Graal VM. Again, that's kind of I'm not sure why, but Oracle does a lot of promotion from Quarkus as being like Graal VM application, and
Mm.
Red Hat and Oracle coming together to promote their agenda, and still we see that Micronaut is the one that comes on top, at least by the assessment of ThoughtWorks, and those are great news. I'm personally very very happy about it.
Yeah, we already know Micronaut runs on Graal whenever they want to. So that's
Yeah, yeah, of
maybe they
course,
just
yeah.
need
So that's
they just need to get to know somebody on the Graal
as
team.
you used to say, it's all yeah, as you used to say, it's all a perspective, not perspective, how do you call it,
Perception.
like perception issue, exactly.
Yeah.
That's yet another example of that.
Okay, so that's good. What else do we wanted to bring up there? Oh, I do have the Micronaut 1.3 M1 release in there. I've got the old one. Okay, so it's not as bad as I thought, but still update the release notes. Okay, a couple other things that have been released. I know you don't care about Gmaven Plus or whatever, but there's still a stubborn group of users who are still on Maven, and to get them to use Groovy is a bit of a challenge. So it's good that that's there.
You know what? Maybe I I don't know what's going on, frankly, especially with Gradle Enterprise that supports and embraced Maven. I don't know what's going on anymore.
Well, no, wait a minute. They haven't. That's a little bit off. It's not that they embrace Maven. It's that Gradle Enterprise, of course, has their nice distributed cache, and the ability to take tasks that have run by one person on the team and take advantage of that for another person on the team when they're doing a build on the same project is very useful. And Gradle Enterprise has extended the distributed cache to Maven tasks as well. So that's it. They already had the distributed cache mechanism in there. It's nice that they can work with Maven also. It expands their market. I think the other thing they do is that I think they can apply build scans to Maven
Yeah,
builds, just
exactly,
like they do
exactly,
with
exactly.
regular Gradle builds too. So
Right, right, right.
but so in other words, that may be as much perception as reality too, that they're trying to make inroads. I mean, because if you look at the Stack Overflow developer survey, or well, any of the other major developer surveys, there's a stubborn persistence of the market share of Maven versus Gradle. I mean, Maven still hangs out in the low 60s, and Gradle's in the low 30s, and then everybody else is small fry. And it's very difficult
So
to break that.
that's another question. The small fry is also an interesting question because we just saw both Lyft and Uber moved from Gradle to Basil.
Yeah. So Basil, however you pronounce it,
I
Basil,
don't know
that's the
how to,
one.
yeah, Basil
Yeah,
probably.
Basil's the one from Google. And then there's Blaze, I think, which is kind of if I understand correctly, it's a fork of Basil that's being used at Facebook, of all places.
Yes,
So if you
yes,
say
yes. That's
Uber
what
and
I
Lyft or
know.
whatever are moving to Basel, still, if you're looking at I think the reason, if I understand correctly, the reason that they created Basel was because I know Google is famous for having this enormous mono repo,
Exactly.
where
Yeah.
everything is in one massive repository. I mean, it's got to be simply terabytes of size, right?
Yes, for sure.
And
And yep, it looks like whoever uses mono build in terms of the build speed on Basil.
yeah, so I mean, if you're not a company that has like multi-terabyte size mono repos, then I mean, Gradle, of course, wasn't designed for that sort of thing. Although I have no idea how well they handle it. I've never had to deal with that sort of thing. I mean, you have to ask some of the Gradle people. I imagine it'd be
Yep.
fine, but and Google's such an academic organization. I'm sure there's a lot of not invented here type stuff going on. And if we didn't invent it, how good could it be? And so
Yeah,
they
the
have.
Facebook, yeah, Facebook's thing called Buck actually,
Oh, Buck,
and
right.
right, right, and I think I'm not sure if it is a fork of Basil.
But,
I'm trying to recall where the
well,
when this.
Blaze might have been, or maybe I got that one wrong too.
I think
Uh,
Blaze. I think Blaze is or something. I mean, that's like it's a lot of going on.
yeah, I'm not sure,
I'm
but
not. Yeah, me
again, if
too.
you just look at the developer surveys, yes, some of these large companies are using these tools, but in reality, in terms of mind share, in terms of market share, they're very small numbers. I mean, all of them well less than 10%.
But again, it's the perception, right? When you have those big news that here Uber leaves Gradle for Basil because
Yeah,
Gradle sucks, and then Lyft, as they usually do, does the same. Or yeah, maybe this time it was the other way around. I'm not sure who followed whom, but yeah, that's kind of a. It makes you wonder. Yeah.
well,
So I guess what I wanted to say that. As long as everybody else is fine with Gmaven Plus, I guess I'm fine with Gmaven Plus. Let it be.
okay. Speaking of things in the single digits, that Ruby's been getting a little publicity off of the TIOBE index. However you pronounce that, TIOBE. The
Yeah.
latest index, for November. So this is as current as they get. Of course, the headline's always about Java being up at the top and Java. But I mean, how seriously can you take this if C is number 2, and sometimes flip flops into number 1? I saw a nice little animation of the TIOBE index over time, and those two flip flop back and forth. Nevertheless, surprise, Python's up there at 3, and then you drop way down. And Groovy has been hovering right around the top 10 for the past few months. I think this month they're at 14. I think a couple months ago they were at 11. But if you look at the percentages, we're talking about, a little over 1, Uh, Ruby's at
Well,
1.2.
that's a lot considering the number of
Yeah.
developers in the world. That's a lot. But
Yeah. I mean,
obviously, it's a controversial topic of how to measure that and all and
yeah.
what's not, right?
but it's good to see it's still on the list there. And I don't see in the top 20 any other alternative JVM languages on that list. I don't see Kotlin, I don't see Scala, I don't see Clojure. I mean, so for what it's worth,
Yeah, and yeah, and obviously I spoke with the JetBrains guys about it, and they claim that the TIOB index is obviously not relevant, and bring
oh
in
yeah,
the C example and all
that's
that. And they have that there are a bunch of others. There is this programming language popularity, and there is a Redmonk. They do their own popularity, and there are different results in each and every one of them. The people one, the PYPL, uses very interesting they use Google Trends for search for the name of the language plus tutorial.
ah,
And what they claim is that this gives you a sense of popularity of the language, how many people are, it's kind of a looking forward. It's how many people are searching for the language tutorial now to start using it in the future. And Kotlin was very proud of how well they are doing there, because they are actually what they are. Let me see, Kotlin, they are number 12, and rising, they added like 0.5% of popularity in the trend. And they're like, oh, where is Groovy? Well, the thing is, Groovy, they didn't they didn't measure Groovy, so it's hard to say. And just to understand where it could be in this rating. So if I will add here, you won't believe it. A Delphi tutorial, you can see that actually Groovy is much higher. So definitely should be on the list. It's just they didn't manage Groovy. They
yeah.
didn't measure Groovy. So it's like Groovy is like 5 times more popular Groovy tutorial than Delphi tutorial. So I mean, it's all ridiculous.
Well, and it's also the fact that they're all arguing over scraps. I mean, we're talking about percentages that are around 1.5 or smaller, and that means that a few dozen adoptions suddenly changes the whole listing and everything. By the way, just for the
Absolutely.
record, on Tyobe, Kotlin is at 35, but of course Fortran's at 29. So you know, Scala's at 30. Whatever. Just there's a bunch of them in there, and then they even have languages under the next 50. It goes on and on and on. So, at any rate, good enough on that. Now, what else did we want to bring up? That do you know that Okta site, OKTA?
Yes, of course. And the Octo surprisingly gives a lot of Groovy content in there. That's interesting.
Sorry, say that again, please. Getting
I
some
said I
technical.
said there is a lot of Groovy content in there suddenly.
Yeah, we got Brian Demers wrote a blog post on making Java test Groovy with Hamcrest. He just basically used the Hamcrest matchers, which is good. Hey, by the way, there's some tech trivia for you. Do you know why Hamcrest is called Hamcrest?
No, I don't. Please enlighten me.
Okay, you know that it's really short for Hamcrest matchers, right?
Right, of course.
Okay, so it's syntactic sugar on JUnit. Hamcrest
Yes.
is an anagram of the word matchers. It is. Take the letters in matchers and rearrange them, and you get Hamcrest, believe it or not, or the other way around. I know. I used it
Nice.
for years and had no idea about that. See, so for our
Nice.
listeners, for both of them, more value added for listening to the podcast. There you go.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is great.
So at any rate, Okta had a
Okay.
blog post. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What's that?
No, no, I said interesting. And while you were enlightening us with Hemcrest, I actually did what this popularity of programming language, the people index do, and try to find where Groovy would have been if they actually bothered to match it. And it looks like that it
Oh,
should be about 20 in the list. Below Kotlin, but and this is the Google Trends for Groovy tutorial, but way above uh, Haskell and Lua and Dart, and
Yeah.
somewhere where the Perl is now. So I guess it's doing fine in this rating as well. It's just they didn't bother to mention, and that's obviously to measure, and that's on them, obviously.
Yeah, okay. I mean, again, it's all publicity and stuff. Just to finish that Octo one, there was one on using Hamcrest with Gradle with Groovy, which of course is really no different than using it in Java. They also have a tutorial on Gradle as well, which is nice. I find it interesting, by the way, that Gradle, to great fanfare on Gradle 5.0 about a year ago, announced the Kotlin DSL, and now it's been a year, and I haven't gotten that many requests for Kotlin based Gradle training. Everything I'm seeing is still Groovy on that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
Yep.
out there, and I imagine people are using it. I certainly used it on the GitHub repository for my Kotlin cookbook because it just felt wrong not to. But it seems that the adoption rate of that has not been what I think we were anticipating. Now, of course, Android is where the Kotlin people live. Android's kind of the killer app for Kotlin, and Android Studio still doesn't support the Kotlin DSL yet, but Android Studio 4 will, and that's in a beta version or whatever. So maybe that'll change next year. But at any rate, the point is that the vast majority of Gradle uses are still based on Groovy, on the Groovy
Yes.
DSL. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So that's
And
reassuring.
it's interesting and interesting to see with Micronaut, because I would say Gradle is kind of they have this Groovy legacy in a good way. I mean, it used Groovy for many years, and many people just want migrate without a good reason. But Micronaut was created when Kotlin was already on the peak of its hype. So I wonder how many users actually pick Kotlin for Micronaut comparing to picking Groovy. That would be an interesting comparison.
Yeah, well, I mean, somebody from OCI probably know that. Be able to give us some better insight on that. Maybe I'll have to ask them when we run into them next. Try to find out. Okay, couple other
I guess we can do. I guess we can put Guillaume on that with his BigQuery exercises to analyze GitHub and figure it out, because there are probably that there is the project structure when you can easily determine that it's Micronaut and then check what language is inside. So Guillaume, if you are listening, here is a new idea for your exercises with big data with BigQuery.
Boy, you got a lot of faith. You think Guillaume actually is listening to the Groovy podcast anymore? I don't know. I mean, that'd
I'll
be
tell you
nice.
what is happening. We have like what 5 listeners. They will all tag Guillaume on Twitter, and then Guillaume will know.
Okay, well, we'll see. It could happen. Um, but yeah, good idea. Okay, a couple of miscellaneous things. Another one of your favorite things ever, from what I understand, is Eclipse, right?
Yes. It's right after Maven for sure,
Yeah,
or even before
exactly.
maybe.
So Groovy Eclipse came out with version 3.5. So that's progress as well. I mean, I'm glad that they're still working on that. Although most people I know who are doing Groovy related things are using IntelliJ. I wonder, I have to check the next Stack Overflow survey or whatever to find out. I'm really using VS Code more and more. You're one of the people who was hot on that, right?
Yes, I love VS Code as an advanced tech editor, if you like,
Hmm. Yeah.
text editor, and that's not to be confused with IDE, which is obviously IntelliJ. That for me, they have different purpose. I use them in different scenarios. Writing code is definitely something to be left to IDE, but just doing like some scripting, or maybe looking at the code, or maybe this kind of more of a lightweight work with code. VS Code is just amazing for that. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and I use it for ASCII doc and Markdown and anything that, as you say, it's a quick and dirty thing rather than a full IDE, whatever. I know their Groovy support is very good. They have a couple of Groovy plugins. They have some Gradle plugins. I saw a tutorial recently that showed how they do Spring Boot, for example, inside of there.
Hmm.
I'm not sure I'd want to do Spring Boot apps inside of VS Code. I mean, when I have IntelliJ Ultimate available, but it's nice that the support is there and it works well with the dev tools too. So I would think the Groovy support would be probably, I mean, again, another nice IDE or editor for Groovy or Gradle. Actually, I've used it when I teach the intro Gradle classes for Gradleware. I still call them Gradleware. I got to stop that. Gradle Inc., you know. Then I generally do that in VS Code just so that we're not locking anybody into a particular IDE. And although we do a demo in IntelliJ and in Spring Tool Suite, by the way, is getting nicer again too. You know, so that's good. But at any rate, the only reason I brought all this up is because it's got the Groovy mode in it, and Groovy Eclipse just came out with a new version too, and it's just good to see activity on that side.
Yeah, that it's alive. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Now, of course, an amusing one that I kind of find fun is Vladimir Orani. How do you pronounce it when they have the little accent on the Y?
I just pronounce it as the same. I think
I'm
it's
guessing
maybe
that's. I'm
e
guessing.
or something or rainy, but I don't know.
I'm assuming that's Hungarian or something like that. I don't know.
Oh my God, we are so bad with names.
Well, at any rate, he's got a DSL which he calls Spreadsheet Builder, and the
Yes.
Spreadsheet Builder went to 2.0. Actually, he called it 2.x, but it was 2.0 when he tweeted it. And the fun part there is, of course, that's on another one of your favorite things. That operates on top of MS Excel, you know, to work with the Excel spreadsheets. Did I ever
Yes.
tell you my Apache Poi story? You
It
ever use
it
that?
actually is about just to make justice for Vladimir. It
Yeah.
also supports Google Spreadsheet. So yeah, doesn't have to be
Oh,
Excel.
really? Because Spreadsheet Builder just says how to read and create MS Excel. Oh, Open Office XML documents. That's XXLX. Really? It also
Yeah, and
supports.
and also Google Spreadsheet. So if you look
Oh,
at the definition of the dependencies, you can see that it has artifact for Excel and artifact for a Google Spreadsheet as well.
oh, I'm just looking at the documentation on the Excel one. Interesting. Hey, did you ever use Apache Poi? POI?
Yes, that was such a pain. I remember many years ago I had to do something and it was like such a traumatic experience. And looking at the beautiful DSL here, it
Yeah.
makes me want to um, omit Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, you know, because I had, again, one of those silly projects where the client had tons of data in Excel. And I'm like, you've got to move that into a real database. And they said, okay. And suddenly I'm trying to write Apache Poi code. Now, I did it in Groovy using the Poi library, POI. Do you remember what POI stands for?
Oh, I read about it, but I don't forget now.
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't
sure
remember now.
Microsoft got to them because you can't see it on the website anymore because it used to stand for Poor Obfuscation Infrastructure.
Oh my
But,
God.
but that wasn't the funny one. The funny one was Excel. They had a framework they called HSSF was the not the framework, the not the API, but the specification that they were using for Excel spreadsheets. They called HSSF. Do you know what
Uh-huh.
that stood for?
What that's it for?
Horrible spreadsheet format.
I expected the H starting with horrible. Yes.
Yeah, and I love that. I thought that was a riot. And now, if you go to the Apache Poi project, you can't find that anywhere because you just got to know somebody from Microsoft said, don't do that, or what, I don't know. But it's an Apache project, and the spreadsheet builder is built on top of that. I see what you mean about the Google spreadsheet as well. They've got the builder POI and the builder Google, etc. So that looks really
And
cool. Yeah. Have
and
you
yes,
ever
I
have to
look at
deal
it.
with
It's
Excel
just
programmatically?
beautiful. It's like I can live with that. It's nice. I like
Okay,
it.
one
And
of the things,
obviously you can do it in YAML. I mean, it feels like Kubernetes suddenly.
yeah, well, I got to admit, I've been stalling on that. I don't have any experience with Kubernetes at all. I've got a friend who's huge on that stuff, and it's funding his company for a while. I've been stalling getting involved sooner or later, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
I like
I
stuff that
guess
runs
now.
locally. Hmm?
I hear you, and you might wanted to stay away because it wasn't clear if it's a hype or not. Look like it's here to stay for a little while at least. So
Yeah.
give it a look. But that was just a YAML joke. YAML is for me is a horrible markup language, and yeah, and but again, for people who love it, the DSL supports YAML. It also supports, so it supports Groovy. Obviously, that's what we care about. You can write it in Java, and suddenly it's like your eyes are bleeding of all the parentheses and the semicolons. You can build it in JSON, which looks nice, but it's like huge because again of all the parentheses. And you can do it in YAML, which looks nice in the example, but good luck with fixing all those indentations when you copy paste it from here to your code. So
Oh,
yeah, out of those four options, Groovy for sure.
okay. Um, just to finish a couple of other little things, I just want to mention that Grails seems to be pretty stable these days. Grails 4 is pretty solid, and it looks like the people at OCI are embarking on a relatively large project to update all of their getting started guides, all of their tutorials to Grails 4. I don't expect that's a huge job. Grails 4 is not really that different from Grails 3, and I mean, it is in some of the details, but in general, it's not that hard. But whenever they post a tutorial on Twitter saying, oh, now the couple that I added in the show notes, like what was the one? Building a REST application with Gorm and Hibernate 5. And there were a couple others. At any rate, they have a little number on the tweet that says 40 to go or 41 to go or something like that. So we actually see progress over time as they upgrade all of their little tutorials, all the getting started guides to Grails 4. So I'm glad that's going on. It's another excuse to point out how useful Grails can be under so many circumstances. So I just want to make sure we mention that on the podcast as well.
Yep, yep, good stuff.
I think that's pretty much everything. Was there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think we did. We covered a lot of ground today, and obviously this is always when we do because we do our podcast so so thoroughly. The show notes are great comparing to other podcasts that just don't exist anymore.
You gotta,
That
dude. You gotta let it go. You gotta let it go. I did
yeah,
find
yeah.
I gotta do the little advertising. I did find my Grails, um, over the search is T-shirt. Found that one. Nothing about Baby Yoda, whatever. That's as close as I'm gonna come to a spoiler there. So, but
Yeah, no,
anyway,
that's it will be the next one, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, who knows? So that's good. Again, I do have to mention my Kotlin cookbook is formally available in December, but it's available as an ebook now. My blog is, I talk about that on my blog now for what it's worth. Okay, that's all my self promotion. I do want to say thank you to the No Fluff Just Stuff for giving us a homepage for the Groovy Podcast. If you go to nofluffjuststuff.com/Groovy Podcast, there's a list of all the available podcasts, and you can even play it right on the webpage if you want. And there's subscription links, and there's even a picture of you and me. Believe it or not.
Amazing, amazing. That's
Yeah.
because so many podcasts, we definitely deserve a picture. So yeah, back to the kind of the biggest action item for you, dear listeners, on this podcast is
Uh-oh.
go and submit your Groovy
Sorry, I lost you a little bit there.
Yeah, I said the biggest action item for the listeners is go ahead and submit to Breach.
Yes, right. Absolutely. So we hopefully will be talking to Sergio in the near future. He's kind of ducking us, you know how he is, but we'll get him on the podcast at some point. We need to see if we can get Simon on the podcast. I mean, if no other reason, but to make sure we're pronouncing his name at least within one standard deviation correctly. in
Yeah,
there. I mean,
yeah,
hey,
yeah.
I say Baruch correctly, right? I mean, so
Oh
that's
yeah, oh
got to be
yeah, oh
worth
yeah.
something, right? But I think otherwise, I think that's pretty much everything. I'm looking forward to Greach. Hope it's doing well. And anything, I guess we'll do another podcast relatively soon, hopefully before the end of the year, right? Where are
That
you off
very
to next?
well might happen. So I have DevFest in Novosibirsk, DevOpsCon in Munich, and then I have QA conference case and bug in Moscow, and then a mobile development mobiles conference in Moscow as well, and then DevRelCon in London, which I'm personally super excited. That's one conference a year that I'm kind of not in a working mode, but in a
Uh,
learning mode, and that's amazing. So, by the way, highly recommended to anyone who cares about developer relations.
I think
It's
the next time we're likely to be in the same place at the same time. You're going to go to Dev Nexus next year in February.
Absolutely, of
Yeah. So
course. Yes.
we've met there the last few times. So hopefully we'll be able to do something from Dev Nexus as well. And um, I imagine there'll be some others. Venkat, Venkat Subramaniam, my friend there, setting up his own conference in March, which
Yes.
most of us keep referring to as VenCon. You know,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. I have a very hard time to actually remember the name,
it's dev.next, I think is what he's calling it, actually.
but it actually has dev.next. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And from what I understand,
Yeah.
OCI is going to have a track there. So there's going to be Groovy, Grails, Gradle related content involved.
Oh,
Micronaut.
of course. Yes. No, that it's all very excited. I'm personally submitted. I don't know if I will get accepted or what's not, but chances are I will be there regardless.
Yeah, that's
But yes.
in the Denver area in March sometime. Oh, I hope it doesn't conflict with Breach, right? Oh, wouldn't be
Uh,
surprising at all, would it?
yeah, so I'm just checking. It's March 24 to 27th.
Well, and Breach is 26th to 28th, so there's an overlap, but not bad.
There is an overlap, but yeah, but I guess. Oh, and the problem is that Greach is Europe, so you need to allow another day to get there. So it
Yeah.
is quite an overlap, unfortunately.
Well, we'll see
Yeah.
how that goes. I mean, Greach, of course, is well established, and that's definitely a good one to go to. So there we've done right by Sergio, don't you think?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. We
So
we
we
definitely recommend everybody to go to Greach, and for sure, if that's impossible, come to Dev Next. How about that?
Okay, and I think that's there were just a couple other items in there, but they could find it. And the show notes, of course, we'll put the show notes in the a link to those in the YouTube video and on the Podbean audio link as well. But you can always find them
Yes.
just to tell people because we never say it out loud. The show notes are hosted on GitHub. The domain under GitHub, it's github.com/groovy-podcast. And then underneath that is the project's called Groovy Podcast. The repo itself is Groovy Podcast. So it's under github.com/groovy-podcast/Groovy Podcast. And we are currently on
I
episode
wonder. I
77.
wonder what happens if you go to GitHub.com and then search for Groovy Podcast.
Well, the search on GitHub's always been way inferior to
Easier.
Google search. So I don't know. But at any rate, that's everything I have.
Let
So,
me let me check. Let me check.
okay.
I just typed Groovy Podcast, and yeah. So basically, you get Peter Ledbrook,
Uh-huh.
Groovy Podcast, updated June 7th, 2018.
Yeah.
Alexa Groovy Podcast, which is an Alexa skill for playing Groovy Podcast from our friend Ralph, and
Event.
Sergio Delamy. Uh, oh, okay. Of course, Groovy Calamari website is there, and then there is Maker Radio, which is I don't know what it is even. So basically, the Groovy Podcast recent show notes is not there.
That's why I figured I'd say it out loud at least once, and then
Yeah, no, that's outrageous, especially considering our podcast, which actually does not exist, is still there.
Well, okay, good. I'm going to let it go. Okay. All set on, are we all set?
We are.
Okay, well, good to see you again. Have
Great to
fun on
see
all
you.
your wild
Yeah.
worldwide travels, and I will talk to you soon.
Yes, thank you all. It was great to see you, Ken, and good luck as well. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Oh, yes, definitely. Take care.
Bye bye.